Welcome everybody again. I want to thank you guys for joining us today as we continue to celebrate Engineers Week. It's an honor to have all of you guys here today to kind of hear from two amazing people. Today is Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day. So I just want to spend a special shout out to all the women engineers out there, all future engineers. You guys are all amazing. You guys are all working hard, and you guys all deserve your own day and to celebrate. A couple of house rules: please keep yourselves muted. There will be a time later on to ask questions where I can call on you to see if you want to be brave and ask your question directly to our panelists. Again, my name is Ricardo Padilla. I am the Outreach and Diversity Programs Manager for the School of Engineering. I've been here since 2019. I'm from Newark, California, born and raised in the Bay Area. And I'm just excited to be here with all you. I'm going to share the schedule in the chat so that way everyone can kind of see it. And then again, just to emphasize, to everybody, I'm excited to have all you guys here. Now I want to get on to introducing our amazing panelists. So panelists, as I say your name, if you could just take a quick minute to introduce yourselves, mention anything you would like to share. Put your social media tags in the chat room if you would like as well. So let's just get started. I'd like to introduce first Dr. Tracy Fanara.
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Tracy Fanara, and I'm an environmental civil engineer. I graduated with all three degrees from the University of Florida, and that whole journey was quite a long one. And if you guys have questions on grad school or anything like choosing a career path or anything like that, please ask. But I worked in consulting engineering, saw that we were mismanaging our land, saw that there was a better way to design our landscape. So I went back to school to prove it. And I graduated. I was storm chased a little, and I ran a research program at Moat Marine Laboratory, the environmental health program, where my main focus was developing new technologies and new solutions for a toxic algae called Correnia brevis, commonly known as Florida red tide. And in August, I took a position with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I now run United States coastal modeling efforts. So kind of like trying to understand, using video games to understand how the world works and to protect people from environmental disasters.
Thank you, Tracy. Now I'd like to introduce Tamara Robertson.
Hi, everyone. So I am Tamara Robertson. I'm originally from North Carolina, but I live in Los Angeles, California. Most people know me because of Mythbusters, whether it's The Search or Junior or 2.0, the last 4 years of Mythbusters reboots I've gotten the chance to be a part of, as well as a really fun prank show called Sijinks with Johnny Galecki, not to be confused with the Sijinks that NOAA, which Tracy is now part of, actually owns. And we did get a couple of cease and desists from them. But before any of that, I actually became a licensed and patent holding chemical and biomolecular engineer at North Carolina State University, go Wolfpack. I started out my career in engineering doing a greenfield startup with a vaccines company. We were actually globally transferring the first mammalian cell-based process to the US. At that time, we only had egg-based processes, which with the impending avian flu as a potential pandemic at the time, we knew that we needed to have another option, especially as we've seen now with the pandemic, where we have had some disruption to things coming across borders from different countries. It was a really amazing opportunity. I came in a week after groundbreaking and ran all the way through our first clinical materials with avian flu, as well as getting sent abroad to make swine flu vaccine, because I worked there during that pandemic and our plant was not finalized. After that, I actually returned back to a company that I had interned with and gotten a patent with in college. And I worked in the plastics additives industry, and I moved a large amount of companies, including Starbucks and McDonald's, from polycarbonate to a more recyclable option in polypropylene with the additive that I patented that made it so that it was just as clear. After that, I got the opportunity to launch a global division for a Houston-based company. And it was funny, I left college with the goal of hitting the C-suite by the time I was 30. And at 28, I was sitting on the global executive board reporting into the CEO. And when I looked back, I realized that for 5 tiers of management, there wasn't a single female. And so I'd gotten to the point in my career where I could finally help and bring others up, but the people that looked like me didn't exist. And so in 2015, I made the option to leave full-time engineering and go into full-time outreach, trying to get more young girls interested in STEM, because it just turned out that there weren't enough of them walking in the door to really fill the jobs that were now becoming available in the tech world. So it was during that time that the Mythbusters franchise found me and gave me a larger platform to be able to talk to amazing students like you and people all over the world about why STEM is a great option and a career path that everyone should go for, especially young girls that may not realize that they have the option to do it.
Thank you, Tamara. It's a great honor to have you both here. So let's just dive into the questions. Again, you don't feel like you have to answer each question. If you don't feel like that, we can just keep on moving. So the first question I have for both of you is, kind of a background. What is your why? How is your background and your life experiences played into why you do what you do today? And for either of you.
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I start every talk with this, and if you've seen me speak before, you've heard this a million times, and I apologize for that. But when I look back throughout my life as to what the pinnacle moments were that led me to where I am now, it actually started at a really young age when a teacher told me about a hazardous waste dump site right down the street from where I lived, where industries were dumping toxic waste into canalways that were leaching into the groundwater and the soils. And people started building schools and houses, and there were birth defects and cancer clusters. And it was crazy because, this all came to light before I was born, but the effects lived on. I mean, my mom was diagnosed with cancer in her 20s, and my friend's mom, same thing, 28 MS. And I realized really quickly how everything in the world is connected, how what we put into the environment eventually comes back to affect our health. And the second pinnacle moment for me, and that incident was Love Canal. If any of you are environmental engineers, you've probably heard of this. It's the incident that began the EPA Superfund program, which is a program that cleans up hazardous wastes that are a threat to human health. And the second moment was when I found out that unsafe drinking water was the world's leading killer among children. And that's when I realized what real passion was, because I didn't just want to do something, I needed to do something about it, whether I was paid for it or not. And that kind of started my journey on water treatment without even realizing it. So those are the reasons that I'm an environmental engineer. The reason why I do the TV stuff is because my 11-year-old cousin came over one time and I saw her Instagram. She was obsessed with Kim Kardashian. And I was like, why aren't you following? And I had nothing to say. There were no good female role models. And so that's why when Mythbusters called, I said yes, even though explosions are kind of environmentally unfriendly. But yeah, so going through college, I realized that my friends were throwing trash out their car windows, and I realized that they had no idea where that trash was going. They thought that everything went to some kind of treatment plant, but every single drop of rain in the state of Florida goes to our natural water bodies. And I realized that telling them that information, their behaviors changed, and they started keeping their trash and not throwing it out the car windows or throwing their gum out while they ran or whatever else, and picking up their dog poop and stuff like that. And I realized that outreach and education is so powerful And that's why I took the job at Mode. It was the lowest paying job I was offered, but it allowed me to do both outreach and research, which really just means 2 full-time jobs, just so you guys know for your future. Tamara?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to find the mute button. Chemical and biomolecular engineer, not computer science. So for me, it's really interesting. I grew up in the deep south of North Carolina. Like, you know, people joke about no stoplight towns. Like, I'm literally from one. And I grew up to 2 military parents. And the one thing that I try to tell every child that I meet is that where your story begins doesn't define where it ends, but you do. Because if I had bought into the narrative that I was sold as a child, I should have been married by 18, had kids very quickly after, and that would have been the pinnacle of my life. And so I fought very hard to try to have a secondary option. I knew that my parents did not have enough money to be able to send me to college. I knew that they barely had enough money to put food on the table. And so it became one of those things that I started working at 13. I started saving. I paid for myself to be able to pursue sports because I figured if I couldn't get an academic, maybe I could get a sports scholarship. And I studied as hard as I could. And I was able to graduate, you know, in the top 10 of my graduating class and be able to actually pursue college. But I had kind of a whirlwind to get there because, you know, my junior year of high school, I got accepted into the U.S. Air Force Academy. I got 4 out of the 5 appointments that you need. You only need 1. And I turned down 5 full rides and found myself at the end of my senior year of high school being faced with the fact that my childhood asthma was suddenly an issue for the Air Force. Hadn't been before that, but suddenly was. And so I got to the end of high school having worked as hard as I possibly could to get all these scholarships, turned them all down, and was left with no option. And so I quickly pivoted and joined the local technical college. From there, I started pursuing history. I laugh all the time because I really got lost on the way to graduation. I started pursuing history because I figured I would still go military because it was the only thing I knew. And I was going to go into JAG, and I had a teacher sit me down and be like, hey, your math and science scores are amazing. Why aren't you looking at engineering? And I literally laughed and I said, girls don't do that. Because the only engineer I knew was Scotty from Star Trek. I didn't know a single one in person, and I surely had never seen a female engineer anywhere on television. And so she laughed because it turned out she was an engineer. And she took me up to a local university to be able to see it. And that was NC State. And I was sitting in a material science class. And for the first time ever, I felt challenged and engaged because I had also grown up a tinkerer from the, like, as soon as I was big enough to be able to waddle around a garage and not slam my head on something, my dad had me in there bringing tools to him and learning everything mechanical. But again, being in the debutante South, that was not something that I got to openly embrace. So this idea of being able to not only finally publicly embrace my love of all things mechanical and tinkering, but also to be able to potentially make money doing it was just an absolutely crazy idea for me. And so I started, you know, at the time I had to choose what kind of engineering I wanted because I became an engineer junior year. So we all know about junior year, you have to say which one you're going to be. And so for me, chemical and biomolecular engineering gave me the most flexibility because I really didn't have to choose. And so it gave me the flexibility to pursue any option. And I went into it and I joined Engineers Without Borders in college because outreach was something I had always done. And I'd always been obsessed with the idea of Doctors Without Borders. And I literally remember the day I was walking up the steps in the Brickyard and I saw Engineers Without Borders written in chalk. And I was like, we do that too. And I signed up and I spent all of my college time in that. And I knew that it was something that I wanted to continue doing. I wanted to make sure everything I did as an engineer was helping someone. And so my senior year, I was given the opportunity to design the downstream process for what would be the future vaccines facility I would work at. And I was like, you know what? Biotech is the lowest paying career a chemi can go into. but it's also one where when you're working 16, 18-hour, or work days, like you're like, I know why I'm here. I know that I'm saving babies and I know that I'm saving people. And so for me, the engineering part of it was always easy. I still do relief work, engineering wise to this day as a consultant. And like as a volunteer for that, as I'm consulting engineering, I still do volunteer outreach. And, I've stayed on that validation side working with, processes that help people, that save people. And the TV thing, it's the same thing as Tracy said. For me, there weren't any females role models out there. And even the ones that had been had been even on Mythbusters were artists that had been on it, not technical or scientific engineers. So it was something that I wanted to put the E in STEM very hard for everyone to see. But more than that, like I went on the show just because I knew it would enable me to get into more classrooms, because in LA, especially, I was having a lot of problems getting into classrooms. There was a lot of, well, why do you want to come? Because, I wasn't a name people knew, and I wasn't an older engineer, and I was a female engineer. So, the expertise wasn't seen by those that would look at me in the face. They just saw me as a young girl trying to come in and talk to their students. They didn't really see the value. So now that's not a problem anymore. And that's all television has ever been, as a side channel to be able to boost the platform and be able to get more girls excited.
Thank you both for sharing that. So given your backgrounds, and this is obviously the theme of this is how tips and tricks on how to bring ideas to life. How has your background influenced how each of you bring like an idea from a napkin scribble to life?
So I think as an engineer, the one thing that I tell people all the time is that we're not taught how to know all the answers. Instead, we're taught how to find them. And so for me, anytime I see something that I'm like, oh, I want to build that, or I want to design that, or I want to actually iterate on that, I just start drawing it. Like I have so many Post-its, it's ridiculous. Like there's a lot of people that use CAD. I just start Post-it outing, and then eventually it'll end up in CAD. But it's one of those things that when I'm tackling a new idea or a new design, I start thinking about other industries that have something similar. Like on Mythbusters Junior, I was trying to design a way to actually automatically fire a crossbow so that I could keep the kids safe while still enabling them to fire it. And I needed mount systems that I could be able to pivot, not just side to side, but also up and down. And it was one of those things that I started looking around at our camera gear, and I started realizing that they have a lot of really cool mounts that they use because they need to be able to get all the angles and cameras. And so like, that's just one example of like, instead of just looking and being like, oh, what can I machine or design? I was like, okay, what's simplistic, fast, easy, and readily available that can also be attributed to this? And I think that that's part of the engineering and the maker mindset, is looking at what you have and figuring out what you can do with it. And then just taking ideas that exist and figuring out how to alter them to fit what you need. And I think the best thing that we can do as engineers is deep dive patents anytime we're looking at something new, because as someone's done it in a different field, and we just have to become aware of it to be able to utilize it too.
To kind of piggyback on that, or just to close on that, I have some lessons that I've learned throughout my career and life that have really come in handy. And maybe I'll just go through the list. It's like 10 things or something like that. So first of all, seek out diversity. Diverse teams scientifically has been proven that they're the most effective teams, but it's not just for work, it's in life too. To be the best person that you can possibly be, surrounding yourself with people that are different can only help you grow. So that's number one. Number two, be persistent in pursuing your goals. If I wasn't, I would have never went to the University of Florida. I would have never went to grad school. I got rejected from UF, actually. I hadn't taken physics, and I was a transfer student. So I went down to the University of Florida and knocked on every single door until someone let me in. And then I had to do the 5-year engineering program in in 3 years. So my grades were not what they needed to be for grad school. But I went and worked, and that was, I pleaded my case to go back to grad school after I had some experience, and it worked. I got all 3 degrees from the University of Florida. Next, play to your strength. Perception is reality. For me, I was like not doing well in a class, and you're not going to like every class. That's the thing. Don't like exit engineering because you didn't like Calc 3. I mean, you really have to think about your end game here. And for me, I wasn't doing well in one of my classes, but I knew that I was creative. So when it came time to actually do a final presentation, I rapped about granular activated carbon to a song by the Wu-Tang Clan. And then also for an air design class, I don't know if you guys know that Lil Wayne was actually in a rap group when he was young, like 16, and he had this song called Number One Stunner. And if any of you are environmental engineers, you know that scrubbers clean air. And so it was the number one scrubber. But anyway, perception is reality. What I mean by that is that if your boss gives you the choice of getting into work or class or whatever between 7:30 and 9:30, and you choose 9:30 but show up at 9:35 when the people that were there at 7:30 are leaving at 4:30, everybody's going to think you're a slacker. Even though you stay until 8, even though you run models all night long and come into the office at 2 in the morning, change something and rerun it, it doesn't matter because no one's there to see it. And I had the biggest problem learning that. If you can tell, this is by personal experience. I learned the hard way about that. Next, let your goals grow up. What you want to do right now might change, and you got to let it. Always go towards your goals hardcore, but when you find yourself being pulled in a different direction, allow that to happen. Next, you're never too old or too young or too different to do anything. Don't let your psyche stop you from achieving anything. Next, what was it? Oh, you make your own luck. If you work hard, the opportunities will come up. They will. And you being at the right place at the right time with the right experience up to that point, it isn't luck. It's you being awesome. Next, go outside your comfort zone. I would have never done Mythbusters if I didn't do that. And I mean, my dad could barely work a toaster oven. My mom was a hairdresser. I had no background, or no one in my family built anything. But from Mythbusters, I realized that building allows you the opportunity to change the world, to create the world that you want to see. And so now my interns every summer, they have to do a communication piece, their research, but also they have to build something so that they have that same kind of epiphany, that they realize that they're not limited to what they see. Next is go outside your comfort zone. It's kind of the same thing. Go outside your comfort zone, take risks. If you're uncomfortable, that should excite you because you're growing, you're doing something that you've never done before. And I say this a million times, if you're going into science or engineering, you're going to lose 99% of the time, especially with science. And if you want something where you win every day, you can do one of these transactional jobs where you just make a sale and you can forget about it. It's kind of like playing Super Mario Brothers where you win. You can put in the code and you can win, or you can do that with these transactional jobs every single day. But with science and engineering, even though you feel like you're losing 99% of the time, that 1% of the time you're changing the world. And that's the kind of personality that you have to have. That's the kind of drive that you have to have, is for that 1% of the time. And next, just be resilient, because you're going to get knocked down a million times, and not just in work and career, just in life. And you got to be able to get yourself back up again. Because, I'm sure you've heard it a million times. It's not what stops you. And you never fail until you give up. All that. It's how you rebound. But it's all true. And sorry, that's my long-winded speech on tips for life.
Thank you for sharing that, Tracy. So next question, with all this experiences and advice, how did you go about picking which ideas to pursue? Like which ideas just stay at a Post-it and which ideas actually move on to CAD, move on to like small, demos and whatnot?
So I think it's something that Tracy and I talk about a lot. We both are people that build because we need something. Like we don't believe in wasting materials on things like that. So for me, anything that I'm designing, it's out of necessity. It's either a tool that I need to actually have. Like recently, I transformed Husky shelves into dolly-driven walls that I could open and close, and I could move around the loft just because I needed the ability to close out my shop at the end of the day and be able to be in a living room in a studio apartment and not see everything I hadn't finished haunting me. So it was like something cool where I had to think outside the box of like, okay, I need storage, but I also need walls, but I have a very small space. Like, how do I do this? And so a lot of my designs come from that, trying to either work through a problem or solve a problem. And so normally they're already going to filter through. But then there's like the personal projects. There's the items that at the end of the night, you're still thinking about. At the end of the month, they're still like kind of poking at you. At the end of the year, you're like, gosh, I really should have started that by now. And then, a couple years go by and it's still there, kind of, piquing your interest. And that's why I always have my design book and I always go back to it. But what determines when those get to be followed is time and money, because a lot of personal projects are things that aren't going to make you money. They may never make you money, but there's something that bring you joy. And that's something I think as engineers, we tend to be very practical in applications, but realizing that it's important to have those moments of joy and those projects that literally bring you nothing but a smile. And if it hadn't been for that mentality, Tracy and I would have never launched Seekers of Science, because it's something that does not make us money, but we've been able to donate over 200,000 copies across the globe. Ricky's actually helping us take it bilingual. There's so many amazing, joyful moments where we see little kids that they'll share photos wearing their bands, or they'll show photos of them with the comic, and the joy that brings. And the knowledge that we're inspiring kids to love science in a way that no one else has thought to do, and that we're bringing real world science and real world tech to their bedrooms and their living rooms and their side tables, and that they're getting just as excited about karate chopping nanoparticles as we get about doing cleanups of oil spills with them. And I think it's something that when you start to equate, okay, is this project going to solve a problem? Yes, then do it. Is this project something that's going to make me money that I may need? Yes, then you're going to pursue it. Is this something that isn't going to make money, isn't going to solve a problem, but it's going to bring me joy? Yes, then still do it. And it's just something that you balance all of that. Obviously, if it's something that you have to do for your job, then the multiplier, and anyone that's in engineering loves Excel, I hope, or at least uses Excel. But you'll have a higher multiplier by something that you absolutely have to do because it's for your job. And then you'll have a higher multiplier next to something that is gonna, be a large time sink or a large money sink in a negative way, because if you have a lot of projects that don't take a lot of time but are going to give a lot of benefit, you want to prioritize those over the ones that are going to take a lot of time and take a lot of money. And then if it's something, like I said, that isn't going to make you money and it is going to take time, then you should also have a multiplier by how much joy it'll bring you. And that's kind of how I go about making all my decisions. Is it something I have to do? Is it something I want to do? Is it something that's going to help people or solve a problem?
I think Tamara answered that phenomenally. And I have very little to add to that, actually. She really covered all the bases, except that what she said about Excel, I've been noticing more and more that interns coming in do not know how to use Excel. So I am going to stress that is something that you should be using. Just if it's not mandatory in your classes, just start using it for fun. Add, subtract, make your own macros. It's kind of like you're able to code in this. Well, a lot of times it comes free on your computer, and if you're a student, you can get it for free.
And I would echo that. Like, learning Excel is vital, because you guys are going to reach a point where you're no longer the person on the floor turning the wrench and running the machine. You're going to be in management, and you have to be able to project manage. And that is all done through Gantt charts and Excel. All project management is driven that way. Salary balancing, if you're keeping track of a large team's salaries, their pay raises, all of that, their numbers, like every single thing you do as an engineer above shop floor is going to need Excel in some way. So even if you don't have to use it, use it. Heck, I used it to figure out, what my first house was that I wanted to live in, by doing multipliers of like stupid things like, can my dog play outside? Use a small dog, a small yard works. Tiny multiplier, so it's very useful.
Thank you both. So going on the Secrets of Science comics, what was that experience like? Like, to kind of go from the idea, the conversations you both must have had, and then to where it is now. Like, can you walk us through like that, bringing that idea to life?
Sure. I mean, I think that every idea is inspired by something. And for us, we were contacted to be featured in Marvel's Unstoppable Wasp comic book. And that was pretty darn cool for both of us. Like, we were super psyched about that. And that was right after Mythbusters. So we already knew each other. We were already like, we wanted to work together. And a writer approached us and said, hey, you guys might want to make your own. And for me, anything that's a team, I'm totally like, I am way more likely to be in for. Oh, that's impressive, Ricky. That's awesome. That is awesome. That's our issue. But yeah, so we started that way, and then we started brainstorming, and I feel I don't want to take up the entire story. Tamara, I'll let you go from brainstorming.
Yeah, so like Tracy said, we bonded over our love of superheroes and our love of helping people on the set of Mythbusters. And we wanted to figure out a way to work together. And we got put into Marvel Unstoppable Wasp, and then they actually discontinued the series. And it was something that was truly heartbreaking, because it was one of the few comics that was uplifting women in tech. And on such a large basis too. And so I approached the writer, and he and I had been in the con circuit for years together, because I do science of superheroes at all the major cons. And I said, how would you feel if we picked up the torch and ran with it? I was like, obviously it'll be different. We can't use Marvel comics characters, and we want to do our own spin, and we want it to be like real tech, and it'll be pretty, but it needs to be real to us. And he was so excited about it, because he loved what we did. And as Tracy said, we had a writer that had come to us. So at the time, we had a little preview to show him already and say, like, this is kind of what we're thinking. We want each issue to uplift a real world problem, and real world tech that could solve it, and real world scientists that are working on it. And oh, by the way, we want to add a less than $10 DIY so that kids can make their own oil spill and clean it up at home. And it became something where the first 2 issues were easy. We wanted to cover each other's background. So issue 1 is on oil spills, and it's uplifting what Tracy does. And then issue 2 is on a virus outbreak, which who would have thought a year before pandemic happened that we would put out a virus outbreak issue. And that was based on my background. And then from there, we just started uplifting peers that we knew that were doing amazing work. And we came up with this idea to put actual kid scientists in it too, because we knew we had the Q&A for the living scientists who were main characters in the thing, but we wanted to have citizen scientists, because what Tracy does with Inspector Planet always brings in these amazing citizen scientists. So we started uplifting them in every other issue. And it's kind of grown from there. But we hit a snag, because, anytime you have an idea like this, there does come a point where the money matters. And, you know, we're self-funded. And so we started realizing that, you know, while a writer and us were all volunteering, our artist was not, because art is a beautiful thing and it does cost money to get. And so we're like, okay, we're going to have to fund that. That's fine. We need to have a website to host it. That's fine. But then we realized that just to print an issue was $10. And we're like, how do we get this to kids? If it's $10 at these camps, we're already speaking at these events for free. How do we, on top of that, spend thousands of dollars more on these comics? And so we came up with the idea to make jelly bands. And inside each one is a link where the kids get the digital copy and they glow in the dark. And man, do they really glow. It wakes me up probably at least once every night. And it was something that the kids loved. It was something that was easy to give out. And we started this Robin Hood model where we're like, okay, every time someone buys an issue, we're just going to funnel that into bands. And we went and we launched our first thing at Operation Outbreak. And we gave away, a couple hundred copies, and we were super excited. And then it just kept growing from there. And now we've gotten to a point where certain nonprofits that have the money, we'll do a partnership with them where we do a Tom's model. They'll buy the printed comics that they need, and then they'll donate the same amount back so that we can get more bands and more comics to the places that can't afford to bring us in and pay for it, but we still want to go talk to. But then we hit another snag, and this is what happens when you have a creative process. We had the realization that 35% of America still doesn't have the internet. So how do we get this to the kids that we really need to see that they can define their own story and that they can be superheroes and they can be STEM? And so we originally were just going to keep putting out issues, and we're like, you know what, let's go into a holding pattern. Let's finish the volume and let's get it on Amazon, because Amazon has this amazing partnership with all of the schools and libraries globally, where they can actually get it at cost to print. And when you're printing with Amazon, it gets super, super cheap. So we had at first just started making connections with all the libraries within the US. And they're like, okay, you have to have 3 copies. It has to have an ISBN. So that led us to, okay, let's make a volume. And then we're like, okay, let's get this on Amazon to start making some funds. And then just by opening that account, found out about their partnership with all the libraries and schools. And so now we're at a point where the volume is on Amazon printed, it's in Kindle digitally, and all the schools and libraries that we would have never even been able to meet in person have access to the comic. And so we're like one by one, and now we're moving on to volume 2, which Tracy could talk about.
Oh, do you want me to talk about volume 2? It's kind of a secret, isn't it?
For you guys, because no one else knows yet. You can just give them some sneak peeks on what the next 2 issues will be.
All right, so weather, right? Right. Okay, so here's the thing. There were a few different ideas, and first of all, we want to do a hurricane issue and a cleanup issue, because hurricanes are a huge threat to the southeast. I don't know if you guys out there, we don't even think about storm surge when we're talking about Northern California. Sorry, Noah hat is on. But in the southeast, hurricanes are devastating. And I don't know if you guys followed Hurricane Laura this past year. So Louisiana just got pummeled by hurricane after hurricane. And Hurricane Laura was special in the way that with climate change, the waters have warmed so much that the hurricane actually picked up from a Category 3 to a Category 5 as it made its way closer to landfall, and hit at a Category 5, completely devastating the area. In addition to that, because some environmental rollbacks on oil and gas occurred because of the pandemic, that hurricane went through a refinery and there was a huge explosion. It was just like an absolute mess. And so to bring those kind of situations, I mean, and And let me just back up for a second, because if we are going to make the world a better place, we have to have empathy. And empathy comes from us caring about people that don't affect us, caring about things that we don't think affect us, even though in truth, everything is connected and we all connect each other, but or impact each other. But with this hurricane, we're hoping that this issue will bring people closer to those people in the Southeast and in the islands like Puerto Rico, Bahamas, that have been really badly affected by hurricanes. And then go through the process of cleaning that hurricane up, like how you can help, like how people can volunteer. And then we were also talking about an issue that more tech and innovation that looked at football helmets and creating a helmet, designing a helmet that can better withstand collisions. Well, speaking to the girl with a current concussion, you might want to move that one first. Tara went snowboarding a couple days ago, and let me tell you, you are rocking this. I'm sure you're in a lot of pain. Everybody give a big round of applause to Tamara right now. She is amazing.
Yeah, that's
okay. So there's your sneak
my
peek.
thing is a bit dark, and why I'm a bit quieter than normal. But yeah.
So yeah, we hope to have those next issues out soon.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. We're excited about it. The other part of the hurricane thing, not only cleanup, but we're also going to be talking about the relief workers that go in. You know, I spent 6 weeks down in Puerto Rico after Maria and met a lot of amazing organizations that are innovating tech, because it turns out that one of the biggest things that people don't realize after hurricanes is they think, oh, let's send food drops. Let's just send all this thing. But the thing is that there's food. There's food in the grocery stores that's going to waste simply because the electricity and credit card systems are down. So I met this amazing organization that their entire job is to get on the ground and get those systems back up so that people can start being able to get access to the food and the things that they need that's already there, versus doing all of these drops, which with Maria in Puerto Rico was really difficult because they couldn't get into most of the ports. And so it's like things like that we want to bring to the forefront so people can see like there are options, you know, in these emergencies that aren't being shared. You know, Puerto Rico could actually be a beautiful case study on the way to be able to, you know, survive a situation like that, because there were so many things that they did right. There were a lot of things that they did wrong that they had to learn from. But if we could actually start disseminating that knowledge, you know, and we're seeing the same thing in the pandemic. You know, there were so many countries that were hit before us that had things that they were learning that because it was happening in a vacuum, because they were simply trying to survive, that information didn't get disseminated out. And so we all had to face the same really steep learning curve. And so it's something that, as you know, as engineers and as people in tech, the more that you can share the knowledge that you're gaining, the more that you can share your failings and realize that it's not a failing as long as you learn from it and you iterate and you get that knowledge out there so that someone else can bypass that failure, we can really start to bring everyone together. So that's what we hope to do with SOS. It's what we hope to do with our day-to-day lives. And it's what we hope to inspire all of you to go out and do it as well.
Thank you so much for all that inspiring words and all the advice and the tips, and just seeing how, you know, SOS went from an idea to what it is now and where it's going in the future. I'm really excited to see where that's going to go. One more question I have before I open it up to everybody else. Given that we're in the pandemic, how do you guys balance work-life balance currently in your situations? I know that's been a big question a lot of our students have been trying to, you know, work through right now, is tips on how to balance, since for a lot of us on the West Coast, at least especially in California, we're still working from home, school's virtual, you know, the spaces between where we work and where we school and where we sleep and where we live are pretty much in the same building.
For me, I don't do work-life balance very well. I haven't since I graduated with my PhD. However, this working from home thing, exercise, Like go out, take a run, take a walk, get out of the house and do something. That kind of separates my home life from my personal life, the little personal life I have. But still, exercise, that's what I would say.
Yeah, so I'm in LA, been dealing with the shutdown since last March as well. On top of it, majority of what I do is the TV industry and outreach events, which, as we all know, have been shut down across the board. And so for me, being locked in a single studio room, especially without roommates, has been hard. So the big thing that I've had to learn is a way to get mental health balance more than a work-life balance. Work-life for me, I've already, because I'm in a small studio, I already divide out my spaces just decoratively. So I have a place where I work on engineering stuff, and I have a place where I work on building stuff, and I have a place, everything is on wheels and mobile, so they all become the same place at some point. But for me, the visual separation helps. So when I'm working on building, I'm facing, this is literally only a corner, and I have 2 sheets of Luan up that are held up with command hooks, just so this looks a little bit different to me than where I go and I sit with my engineering books and I do consulting work versus where I go and I read. And they're little tiny places, but visually I'm able to separate them. And then as soon as they opened up the ability for us to go and do outdoor stuff, I did the same thing that Tracy's saying. I started exercising. So for me, I started learning how to surf, which I can't do for 2 weeks now. So that'll be a different thing for me. And I also cannot run, which is my other thing. But running and surfing have been my two escapes. And then I think, honestly, just giving yourself grace. Realize that this is an unprecedented event. No one is okay right now. And that doesn't demean that you're not okay, because people say that they're like, oh, everyone's not okay. That doesn't take away from the fact that you may not be okay right now. And it's okay to admit that. And it's okay to take a moment. And if that means that you binge your favorite show for an entire day just to be able to feel okay, or it means you eat a whole pan of brownies, which I've done both of these things, it's okay. The big thing is to know when to reach out and when to realize that there's nothing that you can find in that moment to make you okay, and admitting that in that moment and reaching out to someone. And I'm a people person. Zoom does not work for me, and I totally get it. If people are telling you, well, call a friend or Zoom a friend, it's the same. It's not the same. If you're a people person, it just isn't. But it's better than not having anyone in those moments. I know, I've lost friends during this pandemic because it is really hard. And I think if I could go back and tell them anything, it would be to reach out. There is someone somewhere that will pick up the phone. Just start going down the Rolodex until you find that person in those moments. Just don't give up. The sun will come up. It's always darkest before the dawn. So we're all getting through this together. And just reach out if you need it. Just reach out to anyone, even if it's Tracy or me. We read our DMs. Reach out to us. I'm sure your teachers or advisors feel the same way. There is someone that cares, that if you're not okay enough to reach back out. So just reach out.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. I mean, everyone listening, if you need someone to talk to, these are 2 amazing resources. I know everyone in the School of Engineering, we're here for all of you as well. If anybody has any questions, either raise your hand or put them in the chat room. I can ask. Now is a good time.
I should probably note that it's interesting because I'm in Florida, and you wouldn't know that there was a pandemic here if you came down here. So it's been weird here in a different way, because it's been really divided over people that care that there's a pandemic and care enough to, you know, socially distance. And then there's those that don't. And that's been a really interesting thing here. But that being said, us down here, we were able to balance, you know, we have outside is nice all the time. And there's other places, you know, in the US, obviously, most other places don't have that option. So that being said, is just, you know, it's that whole empathy thing, you know, thinking about other people and what they're going through is something that I have to do more of too, because what Tamara was just saying, like, I totally get that. But if someone from Florida right now said that, they just wouldn't, as in respect to the pandemic, because it's not stopping anybody from doing anything, and it's weird.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the dynamics between, even for us, for Northern California, Bay Area to Southern California.
Oh, really?
Seeing the differences there too. But I do have a question, since no one else has asked. When did you feel in your journeys that you both belong? When did it kind of hit that you felt like you belong doing what you're doing, and on the missions that you both are on?
Honestly, I don't know that there's a 100% moment that's happened yet. Maybe one day it will. I mean, a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome, and I know like women engineers tend to have it more so. And a lot of that is because, you know, if you say that you know a tool, suddenly you have to give 7 different facts about that tool versus someone just accepting that you know a tool, which is not something that everyone has to face, but it is something that female engineers have to face a lot. So it becomes one of those things that when others are constantly doubting your ability, you know, it plants little seeds where you're also like, oh, did I know it? Am I the best? Like, am I the right person to be speaking on this? But I honestly am okay with it, because it's something that keeps me humble. It's something that makes it so every single opportunity I get, I feel is a blessing. Like, I feel like it's a joyful thing. It's something new. I also really enjoy proving that as a woman I can do it. So like, it's kind of nice to go into this not constant, but relative constantly environment where you're having to kind of reprove it, because I think while I'm having to do it now, if I forge this path and I prove it to these individuals, then the next girl that comes down the pipeline won't have to. And that's the big hope, is that, you know, we keep having this fight and having this discomfort right now, but it's so that, you know, my nieces can walk into any shop and feel like they belong there. They can walk onto any manufacturing floor and feel like they belong there. So I'm okay with not feeling like I belong and fighting to prove that I do, as long as when they get up here, this crap isn't happening anymore. If that makes sense.
For me, I feel I same thing. I never feel like I belong, but it's mostly because I keep on doing stuff that I've never done before. And I keep on going outside of that comfort zone. You know, those kind of 10 tips, I really take them seriously. So right now, I definitely I'm very overwhelmed at my new job, but I know that, you know, my work will end up protecting people that live on the coastlines and even inland. And so I'm motivated by the end result constantly. The times that I do feel like I belong is when I'm with my interns, and it's because I'm trying to make them realize that they belong. And I think that changing that position and rotating it is really important for all of us. And kind of like what Tamara's saying about mentoring, you know, it's important to pull people up, and it's important to look to people above you for advice. I didn't have many mentors. I mean, I did my whole PhD pretty much independently. Long story there. so it means a lot to me to be a mentor to these college students, and it's my favorite part of my job. And it truly is the one place where I feel like this is me, like I'm rocking this. Like, these kids are awesome. They're getting it. I have no idea how they feel, they'll never tell you, but but from my perspective, they have all of my interns have just exceeded my expectations over and over again. And so it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and on that point about mentors, so Tracy and I are coming up through engineering where there's not a lot of people like that are females that are going to be able to mentor us, right? In engineering, at least I've had, especially in traditional chemical, I've had that problem a lot. But I would say to all of you, if you don't see that person that looks like you in your industry above you, don't shy away from looking at other industries, because the problems that women face, or that people of color face as they're moving up the ranks, are going to be the same regardless of the industry. So for instance, like, I couldn't find an engineering mentor, but I had a lot of friends who knew teachers that were up in academia and higher up in the echelons in university. Women that are teachers have had to deal with it. Women or people of color that are teachers have had to deal with it too, trying to figure out how to navigate the courses. You can talk to people that are in totally different fields, like medical fields, law fields, anywhere that you look. The struggle of being one of the minorities, whether it's based on your gender or it's based on your race, is going to probably have been there. It most definitely is going to have been there at some point. So there's going to be someone that's had to navigate it too. And so you can have those conversations about that side of it with a particular mentor, and then have, like, most of my mentors within engineering have been male. And that's because they're the ones that know the machinery that I'm working on, or they know the process that I'm working on. And that's okay, because I can go to them and have an apprenticeship kind of situation and mentorship. But then I can also find a peer mentor or a stepwise mentor in a different field that has had to deal with the bureaucracy side of things. So don't always look at it as your mentor has to have led the exact same path as you, as far as like technical career wise. As long as they have, somewhat of the same path, you can have multiple mentors. You should also outgrow your mentors. And then with mentees, you should be as open to learning from them as teaching them, because I've been learning so much about 3D printing from the little kids that I do outreach camps with. That I would have never known. So there's a lot that can be taught in both directions. But always be looking for those mentors, and don't think that one person has to be both your career field and your navigation field as far as bureaucracy, or even, your stepwise field of, if I want to have a family or I don't want to have a family. Like, all of those can be different mentors.
Thank you so much. I know we have like a minute remaining. Again, I want to thank both of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come here and speak to our students, speak to everyone that's here right now. That you've inspired. For everybody that's watching and listening, please know this is recorded. It will be shared within a week or two. Everyone who registered will receive an email with the link for the YouTube channel that it will be on. Again, if you have any questions or any concerns, please feel free to reach out to myself. I'll put my email in the chat. Again, Tracy, Tamara, thank you guys so much. Hope everyone.
Thanks for having us. That was awesome.
Thanks for having
us. And if anybody has any last minute, I was just going to say, if anybody has any last minute questions, just definitely send them to us. I don't know if anybody sent any through Instagram, through the school's Instagram, but send them over.